Welcome, sleepy one. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Before we begin, please like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And now, close your eyes. Let's begin. I never thought a quiet summer could twist into a nightmare. It began like any other golden July afternoon. Thick, lazy heat soaking into the skin, the kind that makes the world feel half asleep. I was stretched out by the pool, earbuds in, half dozing to some indie playlist. The smell of garlic and butter drifted through the open kitchen window where Mom was making her famous fettuccine alfredo, humming along to the radio. Dad had texted that he was stopping by Redbox on his way home to grab a movie for family night. We lived at the edge of town, on a small cul-de-sac where the loudest thing you'd ever hear was a lawnmower. The kind of place where neighbors waved from their driveways, kids rode bikes until the streetlights blinked on, and nobody ever locked their doors before sunset. It was safe, predictable, almost boring until the house next door finally sold. He moved in on a Friday afternoon. A man in his mid-50s, stocky, with short gray hair and that unmistakable ex-cop stance. Back straight, eyes always scanning, like he was still on patrol even when holding a box of dishes. He introduced himself that evening. "Name's Hank," he said, shaking Dad's hand with a grip that made Dad wince. "Used to be a police officer over in Henderson County. Retired now. Just looking for a quiet place to settle down." Dad grinned, instantly charmed. "A cop, huh? Well, we could use someone like you around here. Maybe keep the teens from turning the cul-de-sac into a rave every weekend." Everyone laughed. Hank smiled, polite but firm, his posture never quite relaxing. He seemed normal enough, respectful, ordinary. For a while. Then I started noticing small things. Whenever I went out by the pool, Hank somehow appeared. Sometimes he'd be watering his plants. Other times he'd be checking the mail or fixing the fence. But even when I wasn't looking directly at him, I could feel it, the weight of his gaze, heavy and deliberate. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he was just lonely, trying to be friendly. But one afternoon, as I lay stretched out on the chair, sunlight warming my skin, his voice carried over the fence. "Hey there," he called. "You're out here every day, huh? Must be nice being young. You a student or what?" I sat up, tugged out one earbud, and forced a polite smile. "Yeah, starting college soon." He nodded slowly, eyes trailing over me in a way that made my stomach knot. "You on Instagram or anything? Maybe I'll give you a follow." I froze, caught off guard. Nah," I lied. "Don't really do social media much." "Oh, that's too bad," he said casually, and then lifted his phone. "Mind if I grab a picture? The light's real nice right now." Before I could even process the words, the shutter clicked. My smile dropped. Why'd you take that?" He chuckled, awkward but not sorry. "Just testing the camera, sweetheart." Didn't mean nothing by it. I forced a tight grin, mumbled something, and slipped inside. My hands were trembling as I locked the sliding door. My heart wouldn't slow down. At dinner, I wanted to tell my parents, but Mom was glowing about a promotion at work, and Dad was halfway through his second beer, joking about Hank helping him install a new security light. It didn't feel like the right moment, so I stayed quiet. Big mistake. A few days later, I caught him watching me again, this time from his darkened window. He wasn't pretending anymore. He just stood there, lights off, his outline motionless behind the glass, staring straight into our backyard. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but when I told my best friend Carla about it, she frowned, setting down her iced coffee. "That's creepy as hell," she said flatly. "You should tell your dad." I tried. "He won't listen. He likes the guy." "Classic," she muttered. "Old men always trust other old men. You want me to come by sometime? Maybe if he sees you're not alone." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Maybe that's smart." That night I couldn't sleep. My stomach was tight, my chest restless. I sat by the window, staring across the yard at Hank's dark house. Around midnight, his bedroom light flickered on. Curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. Dad had bought me a telescope last Christmas for stargazing. That night I used it for something else. I aimed it at Hank's window. At first I could only make out his silhouette. Then he turned. My breath caught. He was holding his phone, and my picture was glowing on the screen. The same one he'd taken by the pool. He stared at it for several long seconds, unmoving before setting it down beside a small, neat stack of photographs on his nightstand. On top of the pile was the face of another girl, young, maybe 12 or 13. Her smile was small and uncertain, frozen in time. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the telescope. I backed away from the window and sat on the floor, staring into the dark until sunrise. Sleep didn't come. Every sound that night, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the ceiling fan, made my pulse jump. By morning, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I brushed my hair, made coffee, even joked with Mom while she flipped pancakes. But every clink of a plate, every footstep outside made my skin tighten. Then that evening, Dad called from the kitchen, cheerful as ever. "Hey kid, we're having Hank over for dinner tonight. He's new here, let's make him feel welcome, huh?" I froze mid-step. "Dad, I really don't think what?" He cut in, setting plates on the table. "Come on, be polite. You've been rude lately. What's your deal?" My throat closed. I wanted to scream to tell him everything, but the words tangled somewhere between fear and disbelief. The doorbell rang. Hank stepped in, smiling wide, holding a bottle of wine. "Hope you folks like Merlot," he said, handing it to Mom. "Perfect," she chirped. "Come in, sit down." Dinner was unbearable. Hank talked easily, telling story after story from his years on the force. Car chases, shootouts, arrests that made Dad laugh and Mom hang on every word. I barely touched my food. My hands trembled so badly I kept my napkin in my lap to hide it. At one point, Hank reached for the bread basket and his fingers brushed mine. My whole body jolted. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered loudly against the plate. "You okay there, sweetheart?" he asked softly, eyes unreadable. "I'm fine," I muttered, forcing a shaky smile. 2 nights later, something woke me, a faint rustling outside like someone moving through the trash. I pushed the blinds aside and my breath caught. Hank was in our driveway, crouched by the bins. He lifted each bag carefully, rummaging through them like he was looking for something specific. Then he paused, holding something up to the porch light. My stomach twisted when I realized what it was. One of my used tampons. He slipped it into a plastic bag, glanced around, and walked briskly back to his car. I stumbled backward, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I grabbed my phone. "Me, he's in our trash." Took something. I'm freaking out. "Carla." "What?" "Call the cops." "Me. My dad won't believe me. He likes the guy." "Carla, then tell your mom." "Me. I will, tomorrow." But tomorrow came faster than I could imagine. I woke to shouting. Blue and red lights pulsed across my walls, sirens cutting through the dawn. My heart pounded as I ran downstairs, barefoot and dazed. 2 police cars were in our driveway, and officers were flooding the living room, shouting commands. My parents, my mom and dad, were on the floor, handcuffed. "What's going on?" I screamed, pushing past one of the officers. A tall cop blocked my path. "Stay back, ma'am. Those are my parents," I cried. "What the hell are you doing?" Then I saw him, Hank, standing by the door, pale and tense, his eyes full of something that wasn't guilt or triumph. It was sorrow. He stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "Those people, they're not your real parents." The words barely made sense. "What? They kidnapped you," he said, voice shaking. 14 years ago. From Wisconsin. I recognized your face from a cold case database I used to work on." The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible." But his words were swallowed by chaos. The police shouting, my so-called parents screaming that it wasn't true. DNA testing later proved everything. The couple I'd called Mom and Dad had stolen me when I was 4. They'd changed my name, moved states, built an entire life out of lies. And Hank, the man I'd feared, the one whose gaze had haunted me, had been the one who saved me. He'd recognized me the day we met. With no proof, he'd watched quietly, collecting what he needed. Photos, DNA from the trash, until he could be sure. Until he could bring me home. The months that followed were a blur of questions and reunions. Meeting my biological parents again, learning my real name, trying to piece together a life that had been stolen before I even understood what life meant. Even now, years later, when the air smells like garlic and butter or I hear sprinklers ticking in the dusk, it all comes back. The summer when everything I believed turned upside down, and the stranger I feared turned out to be the one who freed me. I've lived on Cedar Lane for about 8 months now, and until a few weeks ago I would have sworn it was the quietest street in all of Everett. Nothing ever really happens here. The kind of place where the nights hum with sprinklers and the weekends echo with the sound of kids laughing over bouncing basketballs. I moved here after a messy breakup, chasing some quiet. A small one-bedroom on the second floor of a duplex facing the street. Simple, predictable, peaceful, until the girl showed up. It started one Thursday morning. Same routine as always. I was waiting for the Route 27 bus to downtown, earbuds in, half zoned out, scrolling through work emails. The stop was just a metal bench beneath a sun-bleached ad for a dentist with an unsettlingly wide grin. Across the street, a big oak tree threw long shadows over the cracked sidewalk. I remember the air that morning, crisp enough to see my breath, the sun still rubbing sleep from its eyes behind the houses. I was staring down the road, looking for the faint glow of headlights when that instinct hit me. Someone was too close. That prickling awareness crawled up my neck. I turned. A girl stood right beside me, maybe 8 or 9 years old, skin pale as chalk, hair the color of wet dirt, tangled but tucked neatly behind one ear. Her backpack looked heavy enough to topple her over, one strap hanging loose off her shoulder. She didn't fidget, didn't smile, just stared. "Hey, kiddo," I said, awkwardly tugging one earbud free. "You scared me there." Nothing. Not even a blink. Her gaze stayed fixed on me. Then she spoke softly, like she was saying something secret. "You're really pretty." It caught me off guard. I gave a small laugh. "Well, thanks. That's sweet of you." But she didn't move. Her eyes stayed on mine, too still, too calm. Then she tilted her head slightly, her voice even and eerily quiet. "I'm going to rip your face off." I froze. My stomach flipped so hard I almost laughed again, out of shock more than humor. "What?" I said, half laughing, searching her face for any sign she was joking. She just blinked once, slow. "You'll see." That's when I noticed him. A man standing across the street, tall, scruffy, maybe mid-40s, gray hoodie pulled up. He was watching us, not just glancing, watching. I thought, that's her dad. But then the girl's head whipped around, following my gaze. She pointed at him suddenly, her voice ripping through the morning air. "Stop watching me." Her scream didn't sound like it came from a child. Too sharp, too loud, like something straining to fit through her small frame. The man jerked, startled, then turned and ran. Just bolted down the sidewalk without looking back. The girl faced me again. Her eyes were huge now, wide and hollow. Then without another word she spun around and sprinted after him, her backpack bouncing wildly. I stood there frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The bus arrived 30 seconds later, sighing to a stop beside me. I climbed on autopilot, fumbling my card, dropped it twice before I finally got it to scan. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For days afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every detail replayed in my mind like a looping nightmare. The way her voice stayed calm, the look in her eyes, the man running. I even brought it up at lunch with one of my coworkers. She shrugged, poking her salad. "Kids say creepy shit all the time. You ever see those TikToks where they talk about past lives?" I laughed weakly, pretending that explanation settled something in me. God, I wanted it to. Then came last Saturday. I was waiting outside my friend Nate's apartment building, killing time while he grabbed his jacket. The place was 2, maybe 3 suburbs away from Cedar Lane, miles from that bus stop. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and blue, the air smelling faintly of rain. I leaned on the railing, cigarette in hand, scrolling through my phone, half lost in thought. Then I saw her. Same backpack, same messy brown hair, walking down the sidewalk, slow, deliberate steps like she'd been walking forever. My stomach dropped straight through me. No way. She stopped in front of me, looking up. Her voice was calm again, steady and wrong. "You," she said. "I know you." My mouth went dry. Yeah. I think we've, met before. At the bus stop, right?" She didn't answer. Her eyes followed the trail of smoke curling from my cigarette, then lifted back to my face. Her head tilted again, same slow, deliberate motion, as if she were studying me like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She took a small step closer, her sneakers whispering against the concrete. "He doesn't like when people talk to me." I blinked, glancing up and down the street. The air smelled faintly of rain and car exhaust. Who doesn't? The change in her expression was subtle but wrong. Not fear. Something like surprise, confusion that I didn't already understand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The man from across the street." A chill crawled down my spine. "Your dad?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not my dad. He just follows." For a moment I didn't know what to say. My throat went dry. I kept half an eye on the building door, waiting for Nate to come out and rescue me from whatever this was. But she just stood there, motionless, watching me. Her silence pressed heavy between us. Finally, I forced a breath and tried to sound calm. "Look, kid, are you lost?"
Do you need me to call someone?
Her brow furrowed like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she said softly, "He said you'd say that." My heart kicked hard.
Who did?
Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. The corners of her mouth twitched like she was holding back a smile. "You'll see soon." The words hit me like déjà vu, same tone, same calm certainty. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Nate's voice echoed down the steps. "Yo, you ready?" I turned toward him, relief flooding through me. Yeah, 1 sec. When I looked back, the sidewalk was empty. The girl was gone. No running footsteps, no sound at all. Just the faint sway of the trees in the evening wind. That night I tried to shrug it off. Nate and I hung out, drank a few beers, played video games. But I couldn't shake her from my head. Every creak in the hallway made me glance at the window. Every shadow felt too long. By midnight I'd had enough and decided to head home. Cedar Lane was quiet when I got off the bus. Quiet the way only small streets get after midnight. Streetlights hummed and flickered one by one, casting uneven pools of yellow across the pavement. I crossed the spot where I'd first met her. My breath fogged in the air. That's when I heard it. Soft tapping behind me. Footsteps. I turned fast, expecting a jogger or maybe a neighbor taking out trash. The street was empty. Just the whisper of wind through the oak branches. When I reached my driveway, I saw it. A small pink backpack sitting neatly on my front step. It was the same one. I stood there for a long moment, every instinct screaming, "Don't touch it." But curiosity won. Slowly I crouched and unzipped it. Inside were a few crumpled papers, some small plastic toys, and a photo. It was a printed photo of me at the bus stop. Same coat, same angle, earbuds in, my head tilted down exactly as I remembered. Only, I hadn't seen anyone taking pictures that day. Across the bottom, scrawled in messy black marker, were 3 words. "You'll see soon." That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house made my heart jolt. Around 2 a.m. I heard it again, a faint scraping sound from outside my window. I pushed the blinds aside. She was standing under the flickering streetlight, face tilted up toward my apartment. Same blank stare. My breath caught. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. She raised one hand slowly, pointed toward my window and said something. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear through the glass. Against every sane impulse, I unlatched the window just enough for her voice to drift through. Quiet. Calm. Icy. "He's behind you." I spun around, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Nothing. Empty room. When I turned back, she was gone. Weeks passed without a sign of her. I started to convince myself it had all been stress. Grief from the breakup, too many sleepless nights. Maybe I'd imagined it all. But last night everything came back. I came home from work and noticed the front door slightly open. I could have sworn I'd locked it. My voice shook as I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The air inside felt thick, stagnant. I stepped into the living room and froze. Every photo frame I owned had been turned around, faces pressed to the wall, except one. On the coffee table lay that same printed photo of me at the bus stop. Only now, beneath the words, "You'll see soon," someone had drawn a small black heart. Then, 3 slow knocks at the door. My stomach dropped. I crept to the peephole. No one. But there on the doormat was another photo. This one was taken from inside my apartment. My back to the camera, sitting on the couch, watching TV. That was when I called the cops. They searched, took statements, said it was probably a prank, maybe some neighborhood kid. But tonight, right now, as I write this, I can hear it again. That faint tapping at my window. Every time I glance at the glass, I catch a flicker of movement, a small shadow slipping out of sight. I don't know what she is. I don't know who that man was. But I know this. I should have never talked to that girl on Cedar Lane. Because now every night she comes back, and each time she's a little closer. I remember the exact day we moved into that old house on Red Maple Avenue. It was a chilly April morning, sunlight slanting through bare branches and the air smelled of wet earth and rain. Rachel was already inside, tearing open boxes, humming to herself while our twins, Ben and Logan, 6 and unstoppable, ran circles around the yard, their laughter sharp and bright in the cold. For once, I felt like we'd done something right. I'd just started working remotely for a logistics company after years of city commutes, and Rachel had picked up a few shifts at the local library. The place was perfect, a big backyard, a detached garage, a quiet corner lot. The neighborhood felt peaceful, the kind of place where people waved and kids biked in the street. We thought it was the kind of home our boys could grow up safe in. But there was something about the back corner of that lot that made me uneasy. Behind the fence, tangled in a wall of wild trees and bushes, sat another house, barely visible, like someone had buried it on purpose. I could just make out the roofline through the branches. I didn't know who lived there, and at first I didn't care. The neighbor to our right, though, Ivan, was another story. He moved in about 8 months later. Mid-50s, maybe older. Heavy Eastern European accent, Russian, maybe Ukrainian, I could never tell. Always in gray work pants and a tucked-in collared shirt, even in 90-degree heat. The first time I met him, I was mowing the lawn. He appeared by the fence, lifted a hand and said, "You new here?" Kind of," I said, cutting the mower. "Moved in last year." He nodded. "Yes, quiet place. Good for children." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "That's what we thought, too." He didn't smile back. Just stared, flat, expressionless, and walked away. That was the last real conversation I had with him for months. By June, the twins practically lived outside. We'd bought one of those inflatable pools you fill with the hose, plastic boats and squirt guns floating around. Their laughter carried all afternoon, bouncing between the fences. That Saturday, I was trimming hedges along the back while Rachel was inside making lemonade. Everything felt perfectly ordinary. Then I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Up in one of Evan's windows, the one facing our yard, I saw him. Standing perfectly still, half hidden behind the curtain. His face was shadowed, but I knew it was him. Watching. The instant I turned, he stepped back, swallowed by the dark. It couldn't have lasted more than a second, but it chilled me. "Hey boys," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Come on out for a bit. Water's getting cold." They groaned, splashing one last time before trudging inside. I didn't want to scare them. I just needed to think. That night, over dinner, Ben said suddenly, "Mom, Dad, there was a light next door. Like a flashing light." Rachel frowned. "What kind of light, honey?" "Like when you take a picture," Logan said. "It came from the top window." My stomach dropped. "You sure?" Both boys nodded. Rachel looked at me, her expression tightening. "You think he was—" "I don't know," I said quietly. "But it sounds like it." She pressed her lips together. "You should go talk to him." So I did. It was early evening, sky orange and heavy with heat. I walked next door and knocked. His car, a faded blue sedan that hadn't moved in weeks, sat in the driveway. I knocked again. Nothing. Rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. Silence. I waited a full minute, listening. No footsteps, no TV, nothing. Just stillness. Finally, I sighed and went home. Rachel met me at the door. He didn't answer? No, but his car's right there. "That's weird," she murmured. "What kind of man hides after being accused of watching kids?" I didn't answer. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that window, the curtain shifting like someone crouched there holding something. Eventually, we stopped talking about it. The twins' birthdays were coming up. Rachel's parents were visiting, and I was tired of feeling paranoid. Then one humid night in August, I heard it. The creak of our side gate opening. I froze. Rachel was asleep beside me, the ceiling fan whispering overhead. Then came the sound again, the gate closing. I slid out of bed. "Jake," Rachel whispered, voice trembling. "What is it?" "I think someone's outside." She sat up. "Oh my God. Please be careful." I grabbed my flashlight from the dresser and stepped out the back door. The air was thick and unmoving. The yard glowed faintly under the porch light. I swept the beam across the grass, nothing. Then I turned toward Ivan's place and stopped cold. His back porch light was on. He was standing there. He stepped closer to the fence and said in that heavy accent, "You looking for something?" I jumped, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Jesus, Ivan, you scared the hell out of me. Did you see someone in my yard?" He shook his head slowly. "No one, why? The gate opened a minute ago. Thought maybe you saw..." I stopped mid-sentence, deciding to just say it. "Look, while I've got you here, my kids said they saw flashes from your window a few weeks ago. Like a camera flash. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The change in his face was almost grotesque. Eyes wide, mouth twisting down. "You accuse me of something like that?" "I'm not accusing," I said quickly, hands half raised. "Just asking, no. You say I take pictures of children. That is sick. You Americans..." His voice rose, trembling with fury. "You always think you know everything." "Ivan, calm down." "I didn't mean..." But he'd already turned, muttering something in his language before slamming the door so hard it rattled the porch light. When I went back inside, Rachel was pacing by the window, arms crossed tight. "What happened?" "He freaked out," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "Got defensive. Yelled at me." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "That says a lot, doesn't it?" I didn't respond, but inside I knew she was right. 3 weeks later, September came. The nights had cooled, the air thick with the smell of damp leaves. I woke to Rachel shaking me hard. "Jake, get up. The boys, listen." I sat up, heart hammering. Then I heard it, the twins screaming downstairs. We stumbled over each other, racing to their room. Ben was standing by the window crying, and Logan was curled up on the bed, trembling. "Dad!" Ben sobbed. "There was a man at the window. There was a flash." My blood ran cold. I rushed to the window, yanking the blinds. The yard outside was empty, silent, but the air felt wrong, like it had just been disturbed. I grabbed both boys, carried them upstairs. Rachel was crying now too, voice shaking. "What happened?" "They said someone was outside. With a flash!" "Oh God!" She pressed her hands to her face. "I'll check Ivan's place," I said, already moving toward the hall. I went to the bedroom window that faced his house. It was pitch dark except for one thing. Upstairs in that same window overlooking our yard, a curtain moved, and behind it, faint but unmistakable, was Ivan's face. He was staring right at me. Then the light went out. I stormed downstairs before Rachel could stop me, flung open the door and ran across the lawn. My fist pounded against his door over and over. "Open the goddamn door, Ivan!" I shouted, no answer. I rang the bell, kicked the frame, yelled his name until my throat hurt. Still nothing. Finally, I called the police, not because I thought they'd arrest him, but because I wanted something on record. If it ever got worse, I needed proof. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. I told them everything, the flashes, the window, his refusal to answer. They took notes, exchanged glances, then knocked on his door themselves. No response. One of them sighed. "We can't enter without probable cause, sir. If you see him again, call immediately." And that was it. We barely slept that night. Rachel made a makeshift bed for the twins in our room. Every night afterward, I sat out on the porch waiting, watching. But Ivan never appeared again. No lights, no movement. It was as if he'd vanished. Rachel suggested we move. I resisted at first, it felt like giving up. But after a week of sleepless nights and that crawling dread that never left, I agreed. Within a month, we found another place 2 towns over. Smaller yard, less charm, but safe. The last time I saw the red maple house was through the rearview mirror as we drove away. Ivan's blinds were drawn tight, same as always. A few weeks later, Rachel got a call from a woman who'd lived down the street from us. "Did you hear what happened to your old neighbor?" she asked. Rachel's voice was tense. "What neighbor?" "The man next door. Police cars were there all day. Turns out he'd been gone for months. The house was empty, but they found all kinds of weird stuff inside. Cameras, computers, God knows what else." Rachel didn't say a word after that call. She just looked at me, pale and hollow-eyed. We never spoke of it again. Not to the boys. Not to anyone. But sometimes when the twins are playing outside and sunlight flickers against a window across the yard, I catch myself looking twice just to be sure no one's watching. I moved into that house in early September, just before the leaves began to burn with autumn colors. It was nothing remarkable, just a small, one-story structure with beige siding and a narrow driveway that barely squeezed in my car, alongside my girlfriend's battered Honda Civic. But it was ours. For the first time, really ours. No roommates, no thumping footsteps above or below, no paper-thin walls that transmitted every cough or late-night argument. Peace. Quiet. Lena had been my girlfriend for 4 years. We had scoured rentals for months before landing on this place in Cedar Hollow, a sleepy Long Island town where the biggest drama usually involved a diner updating its menu, or some kid making the paper for hitting a home run. Sidewalks were clean, lawns small and manicured, and at dusk couples with leashed dogs would drift through the streets like clockwork. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac with maybe 6 other homes. Across the street, a cluster of trees guarded a county drainage basin. Behind our yard, only one house peeked over the tall wooden fence, the same house that would eventually make me question everything I thought I knew about normal suburban life. The first few weeks were blissful. I worked from home. Lena taught at a nearby elementary school, and in the evenings we sipped cheap wine on the back porch, letting the crickets' chorus fill the quiet air. We felt like we'd finally made it, like we were doing something right. It wasn't until October that we noticed them, the kids. It started on a Sunday morning. I was raking the backyard leaves when a soft giggle floated through the air. Not just any giggle, the unmistakable high-pitched tinkle of a child. I looked up, expecting maybe a neighbor's kid had lobbed a ball over the fence, but no ball came. Instead, I saw 2 small heads, just the tops, peeking over the fence at the back of our yard. They didn't move. "Hey there," I called, half smiling. "You guys lost something?" No response. Just 2 tiny heads frozen like statues. Then, almost in unison, they ducked down as if playing hide-and-seek. I shrugged it off. Kids were weird, I told myself. Later that night, Lena and I were sprawled on the living room couch, the TV murmuring in the background when she froze mid-sentence, her fork pausing in mid-air. Did you just see that?" she whispered, eyes fixed on the back window. "See what?" I asked, leaning in. "Someone at the window." I stood immediately. The blinds were half closed, but I thought I saw a flicker of movement just beyond the glass. Heart thudding, I slid open the door and flipped on the porch light. Empty yard, no one. Lena stared, pale and tense. "I swear I saw a face," she said. "Probably a reflection," I muttered, forcing calm. "Could have been your shadow." But she wasn't convinced. Her voice dropped to a hush. "Babe, it was a kid." The next afternoon, I was working at the kitchen table with the back blinds open. Around 2, I glanced up, and there it was. One of them, pale skin, dark hair, just standing over the fence, staring straight at me. I jolted upright, my chair scraping the floor, knocking the table leg with a loud thud. When I reached the glass door, the figure was gone. That night, I told Lena. She didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it, just nodded, her face tight with confirmation. "I told you," she said quietly. The next day, we walked next door to the house behind ours, the source of the children. It was a gray 2-story building with overgrown shrubs clawing at the siding and a crooked mailbox stamped with faded white letters, their edges chipped by time. We knocked. A long, tense pause stretched out, then the door cracked open. An older woman appeared, probably in her late 60s. Her hair was thin, gray, uncombed, and her face looked like it hadn't felt rest in days. "Yes?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. I forced a smile. "Hi. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We just moved in behind your house. We've seen a couple of kids looking over the fence lately," Lena said gently, trying to sound casual as we stood on the front porch. The woman cut me off fast, her voice sharp and clipped. "There are no kids here. I live alone." We froze. Her eyes darted past us, scanning the street, twitching like she expected something or someone. "Well, maybe they were visiting?" Lena offered cautiously. The woman didn't answer. She just shook her head, muttered something low I couldn't catch, and snapped the door shut. I remember walking away, glancing back once and catching the faintest movement of the curtain in her upstairs window. Just a twitch, a whisper of motion, but enough to make my stomach tighten. The following week we tried to ignore it, but the children kept appearing. Night after night they'd peek over the fence, silent and still, sometimes when the house was quiet. I could hear faint laughter drifting from the backyard. Lena stopped going outside after dark altogether, insisting she didn't want to be alone. One Friday, I stayed up late for work. Passing the back window for a glass of water, I noticed something catching the porch light. A reflection, subtle but unmistakable. Two small shapes stood by the fence. My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. I flipped the outdoor light on, and in that instant I saw them clearly. Two children, shoulder to shoulder. A boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9. Their clothes were old-fashioned. White shirts, dark pants for him, a faded nightgown brushing her knees for her. Their faces were expressionless, not a blink, not a twitch. Then, as the porch light flickered, they vanished. Just like that. I barely slept that night. The next morning, Lena found me at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee. "I saw them," I said flatly. Her face went pale before I even finished. "What did they do?" "Nothing," I said. "They just stood there." We decided to install motion-activated lights and a camera in the backyard. While setting it up that afternoon, I noticed 2 small handprints smudged into the dirt beneath the fence. Tiny, child-sized, unmistakable. That night, I checked the camera feed around 11:30. Nothing. But the next morning, there was a short 8-second clip from 2:17 a.m. Faint shapes hovered near the fence. No faces visible, but 2 small figures stood side by side, then vanished from view as the clip ended. A week later, screaming erupted from the house behind us. At first faint, then sharp and panicked. Lena bolted to the window. "Oh my God, listen!" It was unmistakable, coming from the Carver house. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. The scream cut off mid-sentence, vanishing into a silence heavier than the sound itself. We waited, no lights flickered on. No one appeared. 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. They circled the property, then returned, shaking their heads. "House looks empty," one said. "No signs of disturbance. Are you sure it came from here?" We nodded, but the doubt in their eyes gnawed at me. Lena called after them. "What about the woman who lives there?" The younger officer frowned. "Ma'am, that property's been vacant for over 6 months. The owner passed last winter. You probably heard something else." Lena's jaw dropped. My knees felt like they might buckle. "That's not possible. We talked to her. We were right there." She answered the door. The officer forced a polite, uneasy smile. "Maybe you met a relative clearing it out. But the house has been empty for a while." When they left, Lena sank onto the couch, pale and silent. I went to the window again, staring at the fence. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the dirt at its base, a small wooden toy car. Faded red paint, 1 wheel missing, the bottom scrawled in shaky handwriting. Tommy Carver, age 9. I haven't seen the kids since that night. But sometimes, standing at the kitchen sink, I feel it. The same stillness, the sense of eyes pressing through the glass. And once, when the wind was low and the night completely silent, I could have sworn I heard it again. Soft giggling from behind the fence, faint and knowing, as if they were still there. Watching, waiting. I moved to a quiet little town called Ridgefield Springs about 6 months ago. It was one of those places where the houses were spaced wide apart, the streets shaded by sprawling oak trees, and strangers waved at you as easily as neighbors. I'd thought it would be perfect for my kids, my 5-year-old son, Noah, and my 3-month-old daughter, Emmy. My husband worked out of town during the week, leaving me to juggle the days mostly alone. That morning, the sky was a flawless, uninterrupted blue, the breeze warm and soft, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. It was the kind of day that practically demanded you step outside. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Hannah. She was heading to Cedar Grove Park with her daughter, Lucy. I hadn't been there yet, but Hannah promised it had fantastic playground equipment, a spacious parking lot, and open grassy areas surrounded by trees. It sounded ideal. I packed snacks and diapers, bundled Emmy into her carrier, and got Noah buckled into his little car seat. When we arrived, the park was quiet, the kind of calm that feels like it's holding its breath, punctuated only by bird song and the occasional laughter of children. Hannah was already there, chatting with another mom, Brenda, who had brought her 2 daughters. Besides us, the only other people present were a man slouched on a bench, absorbed in his phone, and 2 older kids, a boy and a girl who looked maybe 10 or 11. Noah didn't hesitate. He sprinted straight for the slides, squealing as he climbed. Emmy nuzzled against my chest, finally drifting towards sleep. It felt peaceful. Normal. Hannah scooped Emmy up and made exaggerated, silly faces while Brenda talked about summer school programs, her voice low and calm. I leaned back on the bench, enjoying the warm sun on my shoulders. Eventually, the kids began to wander, splitting into smaller groups. Noah's eyes landed on the seesaws positioned a little ways off, shaded under tall trees with a stretch of grass separating them from the main playground. Beyond the trees, a faint construction site hummed quietly, occasional hammering but mostly silence. "Mom," Noah called, his voice bright. "Come play on the seesaw with me." I hesitated, glancing down at Emmy, now curled up and nearly asleep. "Buddy, can you wait a few minutes?" I said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. He frowned and kicked at the grass, the tip of his tongue caught between his teeth. Then a quiet voice cut in beside me. "I can play with him if you want." I turned slowly. The older boy, one of the pair from the edge of the park, stood there, sandy brown hair falling slightly into his eyes. His skin was pale, almost unnaturally so, and his expression was flat, unreadable. He wasn't shy. There was just nothing there, no flicker of emotion. "Oh," I said, caught off guard. Sure. That's really nice of you." He nodded once, a sharp, brief motion, and then walked over to Noah. No smile, no hesitation. Oddly, he had asked me instead of Noah directly, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just polite, awkward even. Noah, oblivious, chattered a mile a minute, hopping onto the seesaw. The boy sat opposite him, silent but steady, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. I watched them for a few moments. Noah was unstoppable. Dinosaurs, his favorite YouTuber Ryan's World. The way he planned to leap off the swings like Spider-Man. The older boy listened, completely still, eyes fixed on Noah, and it made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't quite place. The other boy didn't say a word, just stared at Noah. His eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, like he was watching something only he could see. I figured maybe he was just shy and turned back toward the bench, telling myself not to be weird about it. A few minutes later, the man who'd been scrolling on his phone stood up and started walking toward the parking lot. As he passed, I smiled. "Your son was so sweet to play with mine." He stopped, frowning. "My son?" "Yeah," I said, confused. "The boy playing with my kid on the seesaw." The man shook his head. "That's not my kid. He came up to me earlier and asked if I wanted him to play with my daughter. He's just been hanging around." He gave a short, uneasy shrug and walked off toward his car. But my stomach had already twisted into a knot. I turned back toward the seesaws. They were empty. "Noah?" I called, forcing a laugh at first. "Hey, buddy?" No answer. A sharp, cold panic hit me. I handed Emmy to Hannah, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped her. "Hold her, something's wrong," I said, already running toward the grassy area near the trees. The distance felt endless, every step pounding in my chest. Then I saw them, two small figures halfway to the woods. "Noah and that boy. Noah," I screamed. My voice came out raw. He turned, startled. The boy's hand shot out, grabbing Noah's wrist, yanking him toward the tree line. "Hey!" "Let go of me," Noah shouted, his voice breaking. The sound of fear in it tore through me like a blade. I ran faster, lungs burning. "Hey, get away from him!" I screamed. The boy turned his head slowly, his face still that same eerie blankness, like my shouting didn't register. Then Noah started fighting, thrashing, kicking, his little fists flying. "Let go of me." He smacked the boy's arm and even headbutted him. The boy's expression didn't change, but he released Noah's wrist and bolted into the trees, vanishing between the trunks. By the time I reached Noah, I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as he sobbed into my shoulder. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're okay. I've got you. You're safe." Hannah and Brenda came running, breathless. "What happened?" Hannah gasped. "That boy, he tried to take him," I said, tears spilling down my face. Noah hiccuped between cries. He said he knew where Ryan lives." "What?" I stared at him, not understanding. "He told me he could take me to see Ryan's house. He said Ryan lived back there. In the woods," his voice cracked. "I wanted to go play with him." I looked toward the tree line. The woods were silent, heavy, the shadows unmoving. There was no sound, no trace. We called 911. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes and searched the entire area. They combed through the brush, circled the park, but there was nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign that anyone had been there at all. One of them, Deputy Carson, tried to reassure me. "Ma'am, kids wander off sometimes. Maybe he was just another local boy," he said gently, but no one ever came forward. No parent claimed him. No one else at the park knew who he was. That night, after I finally got Noah and Emmy to sleep, I sat in the living room staring at the baby monitor. The faint hiss of static filled the silence. Every creak in the walls made my heart jump. The next day, I went back to Cedar Grove Park. The sun was out again, warm and golden, the world deceptively normal, kids laughing, parents chatting, dogs barking in the distance. I stood near the edge of the grassy field, staring toward the woods. That's when I saw it. Carved into one of the trees, deep enough for the light to catch in the grooves, were the words, "Let's go play." The letters were jagged, uneven, like a child's hand had made them. I left immediately. Later, when I told Hannah, her face went pale. "You didn't know?" she whispered. "Years ago, a boy went missing from that park. They said he was last seen walking toward the woods. They never found him. I haven't been back since. And sometimes, late at night when Noah's asleep and the baby monitor crackles with static, I swear I hear a voice, soft, playful, almost familiar, whispering through the noise. Want to go see Ryan's house? I don't talk about this memory often. Hell, for decades I didn't even remember it. My mind had buried it so deep that it took a random evening with my siblings for it to claw its way back. Sharp and insistent. We were all gathered around my sister's dining table, laughing about Dad, the time he locked the car keys in the car while it was still running, or how he spent an entire hour hunting for his glasses when they were perched on his head the whole time. Dad was like that. Funny, kind-hearted, absent-minded in ways that made Mom joke it was a miracle none of us ever got lost because of him. Then it hit me. Not like a whisper or a nudge, but like a gut punch I hadn't felt in decades. This wasn't a funny memory. At first I didn't even recognize it as memory at all, but the more I thought, the sharper it became. The smells, the sounds, the sun on my skin, the way the sand clung to my knees. Every detail came rushing back. I must have been 4, almost 5. We lived in Grayson Cove then, a quiet coastal town near the southern tip of Maine, a place no one outside the state had ever heard of. A diner, a hardware store, 1 stoplight, and a beach mostly visited by locals. That was Grayson Cove. It started with an accident. I'd fallen at the playground a few weeks before, hit the back of my head hard on one of those old metal slides, split the skin open. I remember the blood, Mom's scream, the way Dad carried me to the ER with a towel pressed against my scalp. 7 stitches. I had screamed, cried, kicked. I'd been dramatic enough for the doctor to shake his head and tell my parents he'd never seen a kid throw such a fit over a simple fix. Weeks later, when the stitches were ready to come out, Dad volunteered to take me. Mom had a shift at the grocery store and couldn't go. I remember the crunchy paper covering the exam table, the doctor snipping and pulling. I didn't cry this time. Determined to show how brave I could be, I sat stiff and silent. When it was over, the doctor smiled. "You did good, champ." Dad's chest puffed with pride on the drive home. "You know what? You earned yourself an ice cream," he said. The afternoon sun baked the car. The windows rolled down, warm wind whipping my hair around. We stopped at a tiny roadside shop called Sweet Pets. I picked a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate shell. The chocolate cracked in tiny flakes that melted on my tongue with each lick. Dad grinned at me and then suddenly had an idea. "You want to stop by the beach for a bit?" I nodded so fast my ice cream nearly fell. Grayson Beach was just 10 minutes away, a small strip of sand tucked behind dunes, driftwood scattered like forgotten toys, a faint tang of seaweed in the air. A handful of kids splashed in the shallows, their laughter rising above the soft rush of the waves. Dad parked and led me down the sand, shoes dangling from one hand. "Stay close, okay?" He crouched so we were eye to eye. "Don't go in past your knees." "I'll be right back. Just gotta hit the restroom." "Okay, Daddy," I said. He brushed my hair from my face and handed me the rest of my ice cream. "You're my brave girl today." Then he turned and walked toward the restrooms near the parking lot. I didn't think much of it. He'd left me for a minute or two before. I was obedient, quiet, happy just to stand there at the edge of the surf, feeling cold water rush over my feet. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, standing a little ways down the beach, just far enough that I couldn't make out his face. But I noticed his sun-bleached hair sticking up in messy clumps. He noticed me staring and waved. I waved back. A minute later, he wandered closer, the water sloshing around his legs. The day was warm, salty, ordinary, but something in the air shifted the moment he stepped closer. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, so simple, so innocent, was the beginning of a memory I'd never truly forget. "You live around here?" the boy asked, smiling wide enough for the sunlight to flash off his teeth. I shook my head. "No, my dad just brought me here." He tilted his head, curious. "Oh yeah? You on vacation or something?" "Just a little trip. I got my stitches out today." His eyebrows shot up. "Stitches? What happened?" "I fell on the playground," I said proudly. "Split my head open. The doctor had to sew it up, but I didn't even cry this time." "Wow," he said, sounding impressed. "That's tough." "Yeah," I puffed my chest out a little. "I'm brave now." He smiled again, but it didn't feel like the kind of smile people give when they're proud of you. It lingered too long, tugging at the corners of his mouth in a way that made my stomach twist. At 4 years old, I didn't have the words for it, but something about that grin felt wrong, like he was amused by something I didn't get. "You ever swim before?" he asked. "Sort of," I said, "but I can't go past my knees. My dad said so." He let out a soft laugh, the kind that sounds friendly but isn't. "Your dad's not even here. I can teach you real quick. It's easy." I hesitated. "I'll get in trouble." He stepped closer, the surf swirling around his shins. "What, you scared or something?" "Thought you were brave." My little fists clenched at my sides. Brave. I'd said it myself. I didn't want him to think I was lying. So I took a few hesitant steps forward. The cold water rose past my knees, then up to my waist. He grinned. "See? That's not so bad." Then he moved closer again. Too close. Before I could react, his hand shot out, grabbing my arms, and he shoved me under. I didn't even have time to scream. Salt water flooded my mouth and nose. The world exploded into silence, except for the muffled rush of bubbles and the pounding of my own heart. I kicked and thrashed, tiny fingers clawing at his wrists. But he was stronger. So much stronger. Through the wavering light, I could see his shape above me. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even smiling anymore. His face was blank, cold, deliberate. He was holding me down on purpose. My lungs burned. My chest felt like it might burst. I'm going to die, I thought. And then, suddenly, his grip vanished. Strong arms yanked me upward. I broke the surface, coughing, choking, screaming. My dad's voice, raw, terrified, cut through everything. He scooped me out of the water and pressed me against his chest. I'll never forget his face, the confusion melting into horror, then into something darker. Rage. He wrapped a towel around me, patting my back as I sobbed into his shirt. "It's okay. You're okay, baby. You're okay." He said it over and over like he was trying to convince himself. When I could finally breathe, I looked around. The boy was gone. The other kids, too. The beach looked empty, eerily empty, just the wind and the soft crash of waves. Dad stood scanning the shoreline. "Who was it?" he demanded. "Who did that to you?" I pointed with a trembling hand toward the water. "The boy," I whispered. "The blonde boy." Dad's jaw tightened. His face went red. Without another word, he turned toward the parking lot, muttering something under his breath. I think he meant to find the kid or his parents if they existed, but they were already gone. The beach felt different after that. Too quiet, too still. We left not long after. Dad didn't say a word on the drive home. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Every now and then he'd glance at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wet, his mouth tight. He never told Mom. I know that because if he had, she'd have lost her mind, not just at the boy, but at him too for leaving me alone. A few weeks later, Dad got a new job inland. We moved. I started school. Life went on. The memory faded, or maybe I forced it to. But 15 years later, when I was in high school, we went back to Grayson Cove one summer for a day trip. The town hadn't changed much. Same quiet streets, same salt-heavy air. I wandered down to the beach alone. It looked smaller than I remembered, the driftwood bleached bone-white from the sun. And there near the dunes stood a man, tall, lean, mid-20s maybe. His hair was short, pale blonde. He just stood there staring out at the water. Something about him stopped me cold. Our eyes met for a second and I swear, he smirked. Just barely, like he knew me, like he remembered. Then he turned and walked away without a word. I told myself it couldn't be him. It had been too long. People change, memories twist. But that night I dreamed I was back in that water, my lungs burning, sunlight fading to black. Only this time when I looked up through the ripples, it wasn't a boy holding me down. It was a man, the same cold, blank smile. And now whenever I visit the coast, I catch myself scanning the shoreline without even realizing it, searching for a flash of blonde hair. Because deep down, part of me still wonders if he ever left that town, or if he's still there, waiting for another brave little kid to wander just a bit too far out. I moved into that apartment complex the first week of August, right before the fall semester started. It was supposed to be a clean slate. New city, new school, new life. After everything that fell apart back home, all I wanted was quiet. Somewhere small, manageable, somewhere I could breathe and focus. The place was in a little college town called Maple Bend, about 40 minutes outside Chicago. I rented a room in a 3-bedroom unit with 2 other girls, Sophie and Erin, both juniors at the same university I'd just transferred to. The apartment wasn't much, but for $600 a month, utilities included, I couldn't complain. The walls were thin enough to hear someone cough next door. The paint peeled in random spots, and most windows faced the inner corridor instead of the street. That meant every time someone walked past, if your blinds weren't shut, they could see right in. Still, everyone seemed decent. The neighbors were mostly students or quiet, older tenants who minded their business. I felt safe enough that first week. Sophie showed me around, friendly and talkative, introducing me to the landlord's son, Nate, who handled maintenance and warned me which washers wouldn't eat my quarters. Erin barely spoke, always in her room with noise-canceling headphones, but she wasn't rude. For the first month, things were fine. Between classes and studying, I was barely home. The apartment felt temporary, like a rest stop, and I was okay with that. It started about 3 weeks into September, a Thursday night close to 11. I was getting ready for bed when faint music drifted in. Old pop songs I hadn't heard since middle school. Katy Perry, Avril Lavigne, a few early 2000s hits. I figured it was some frat party nearby. Campus was full of them that time of year. But the sound wasn't echoing from outside. It was muffled and close, like it came from another apartment. I shrugged, threw on my sleep shirt, and lay down with a YouTube video humming quietly from my phone. Just as I started to drift off, a new sound crept in, a sharp, repetitive drilling. I blinked, confused, thinking maybe I was imagining it. I paused the video. The drilling kept going. Seriously? Who the hell's using power tools at this hour? I muttered. It was too late for repairs. I got up, padded across the floor, and followed the noise. It grew louder near my window. When I pulled the curtain aside, I froze. The sound was coming from across the narrow corridor, from Unit 2B. Except 2B was supposed to be empty. Sophie had told me that my first week. No one's lived there for months, she'd said. The last tenants broke their lease. But someone was definitely inside now, using a drill and blasting old pop songs. For a second, I thought maybe the landlord sent a crew to fix something before renting it out. But who works past midnight? By 12, the drilling turned to hammering. Short bursts, then silence, then more pounding. I texted Sophie. Tinder, hey, you hear that? Someone's working next door. No response. Erin's door was shut, her light off. I started recording a short video for a friend back home. You could hear the hammering clearly through the glass with that same bubblegum pop playing low in the background. My friend texted back, for your friend, call the cops. That's illegal, dude. Nobody does construction after 11. Me. Yeah, but maybe it's maintenance or something? Friend. At midnight? Come on. That's sketchy. He was right, but I didn't want to deal with it. I just wanted to sleep. By 1 a.m., the noise still hadn't stopped. My nerves were raw. I tied my robe tight and stepped into the hallway. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above me. that sickly yellow hum that never quite went away. The sound came straight from 2B. I stood there for a few seconds, debating whether to knock. Then I noticed the window across from the stairwell, the one facing my room, was open. I walked halfway down the stairs, just enough to see inside, and my stomach dropped. 4 men were in there. None of them looked like maintenance. Late 30s, maybe 40s, in dirty jeans and sweat-stained tank tops, their faces shiny with grime. One held a hammer, another a cordless drill. The strangest part was the room itself, completely bare. No furniture, no tools, no boxes. Just a concrete floor under the harsh white glow of a single dangling bulb. They all stopped when they saw me. The music kept playing, something by Hilary Duff, I think, and it made the moment feel even more wrong. They didn't look startled. They looked irritated, like I'd interrupted something private. Sorry, I said, forcing a shaky laugh. It's just kind of late. People are trying to sleep. Maybe you could, I don't know, do that tomorrow. 2 of them moved closer to the window. The taller one, bald with a greasy beard, tilted his head. You live across the hall? Yeah, I said, my voice catching on the word. He smiled. Not kindly. Pretty voice, he murmured. Say that again, slowly. Another one spoke quietly, and my stomach twisted. Their eyes dragged over me, slow and deliberate, lingering too long. I felt tiny standing there in my robe, half hidden behind the railing. Look, just please keep it down, I muttered, my voice barely steady as I took a step back. None of them answered. They just stood there, still as mannequins, watching me climb the stairs. The moment I turned the corner and they were out of sight, I ran, bolting for my door, fumbling the lock, slamming it shut. I checked it twice. Then I checked the windows. For a while I just stood there, heart pounding, straining to hear. Nothing. The hammering was gone. The music was gone. Silence pressed against the walls like a held breath. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak, every shift of the wind made me flinch. When morning came, I peeked through my blinds. The window to 2B was closed again, still empty, ordinary. Like nothing had ever happened. At breakfast, Sophie shuffled out, yawning. You hear that noise last night? I asked. She frowned mid-pour. What noise? There were guys in 2B, drilling, hammering, playing music. 2B's still vacant, she said flatly, reaching for her mug. Landlord's been trying to rent it for months. Erin came out a few minutes later, bleary-eyed. You hear anything? I asked her. She hesitated, rubbing her arms. Actually, yeah, Sophie looked up. Wait, really? I woke up around 1. Thought I heard tools or something. Tried to move, but her voice dropped. I couldn't. I stared at her. Like sleep paralysis? She nodded. Yeah, I could hear something metallic scraping. We went quiet for a moment. The coffee machine hissed softly. Probably some maintenance crew came late, Sophie said finally. Don't overthink it. But I couldn't stop. Friday night, it started again. Around 11:45, faint music, but different this time. Hollaback Girl, Gwen Stefani. My chest clenched immediately. I didn't need to look, I knew. Tubishman, I texted Nate. Me. Hey, is anyone working in 2B at night? Nate, nah, still empty, why? Like I'm hearing drills, hammering, music, and to run Nate. No way. There's no power in there. We cut the breakers months ago. My fingers froze. Me. You sure? Nate, I'm positive. I'll check tomorrow. I didn't reply. Just sat staring at my screen, the room too quiet. That night I didn't open my curtains. I didn't even move close to the window. I just listened. The music faded around 1. But at 3:30 I woke again. No music now, no hammering. Just breathing. Slow, heavy breathing right outside my window. I held still, held my breath. The air felt thick, electric. Then came a faint shuffle, like shoes dragging over carpet, and silence again. When Nate arrived that afternoon, I followed him to 2B. He unlocked the door, swinging it wide. He was right. The place was spotless, bare concrete floors, dust on the walls, no furniture, no wires, nothing. But the air felt wrong, stale and metallic like old pennies or blood. What about those stains? I asked, pointing at dark smudges in the far corner. Nate crouched, pressed his thumb to one. Probably rust. Pipe leak or something. He straightened, brushed his hands off. Told you no one's been in here. I tried not to think about it. That night I stayed in the living room, earbuds in, pretending to study. Sophie went out. Erin was gone for the weekend. I was alone. Around midnight, I pulled an earbud out to grab some water and froze. The faintest thread of music floated through the floorboards. Kelly Clarkson this time, Since You Been Gone. My breath hitched. The sound wasn't coming from across the hall anymore. It was coming from below me. The basement. The door to the storage basement was near the mailboxes on the first floor. I'd never been down there. It was supposed to be maintenance only. But when I reached the end of the hallway, the door stood slightly ajar. A thin strip of yellow light flickered underneath. I hesitated, hand hovering over my phone. Then came voices, muffled but unmistakably male. Hold him tighter, no, like that. Shut up. You want to wake her up again? My chest seized. Just finish it, another voice said. I stepped back, barely breathing, then the floorboard creaked under my heel. Silence. Then, soft laughter. One voice, slow, deliberate. Footsteps followed, measured, heavy, creeping up the basement stairs. I ran, locked my door. My hands shook as I dialed Sophie, no answer. Then Nate. Nate, I whispered when he picked up. Someone's in the basement. There are people down there. What? What do you mean, people? Men, 4 of them. I heard them talking, or hold him tighter. Call the cops. I'm coming right now. Before I could, there was a knock at our apartment door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. Another set, harder this time. Sophie? I whispered. Nothing. I crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. But then movement low to the ground. 2 small shapes stood there. Children. A little boy and girl, maybe 6 or 7, barefoot on the carpet. The girl tilted her head, smiled faintly, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then both turned and walked toward the stairs. Calm, unhurried. I didn't move until Nate arrived 20 minutes later with the cops. They found no one in the basement. No men, no kids. But they did find child-sized handprints smeared on the inside of 2B's window glass. The police searched every floor. No signs of forced entry. No one matching my description. They said it was probably squatters who took off when they heard sirens. But Sophie swore 2 nights later, she saw those same kids again standing near the dumpsters at 2 a.m. When she called to them, they ran straight toward the basement door and vanished. A week later, maintenance sealed off 2B and the basement completely. Renovations, they said. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Soft, cheerful pop music echoing faintly through the walls. Always the same pattern. The song starts sweet and nostalgic. Then underneath it comes the dull, steady rhythm of hammering. And sometimes, if I listen too long, I swear I can hear a little girl's voice singing along. I never used to think much about neighbors growing up. They were just background noise. People you waved to when taking out the trash or borrowed sugar from mid-recipe. When I first moved to the small town of Ridgeview, I figured it'd be the same. Quiet streets, polite smiles, maybe the occasional barbecue invite. But I was wrong. I'd been there 3 months when I met the kids next door, and I swear to God I've never looked at children the same way since. I moved into that house on Maple Court in early October. A single-story rental with an overgrown backyard and a crooked mailbox that leaned toward the street like it was eavesdropping on gossip. The rent was cheap, which should have been my first red flag. The landlord, Mr. Tully, said it was because the last tenants left in a hurry. He laughed after saying it, but the sound cut off too quick, like he'd remembered something he shouldn't. My name's Rachel. I was 28 then, freshly divorced and desperate to start over. My old apartment in the city felt like a cage full of echoes from a life I didn't want anymore. Ridgeview was supposed to be quiet. Somewhere people said morning without meaning anything more. The first week was peaceful. I worked remotely for a small marketing firm, so I rarely left the house except for groceries or evening walks. That's when I first saw them, the kids next door. It was a Sunday afternoon, the air crisp with that sweet rot of fallen leaves and chimney smoke. I was raking when I heard laughter. Not the wild, sudden kind kids usually make, but steady, synchronized, almost rehearsed. I looked over the fence. 2 kids stood there, maybe 8 or 9. A girl with dark curls tied messily, wearing a faded pink sweater, and a boy in a red hoodie 2 sizes too big. They stood perfectly still, side by side, just watching. Hey there, I said, lifting a hand. They didn't answer, just smiled. Finally, the girl spoke. You live here now? Yeah, I said. Just moved in last week. The boy tilted his head, his grin too even. You gonna stay long? Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I think so, I said, trying to sound light. I like it here. They exchanged a glance, then looked back at me and said together, That's good. And without another word, they turned and walked toward their house. It looked almost identical to mine, but older. White paint peeling, a yellow tricycle half buried in leaves, curtains drawn tight across every window. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I froze mid-rinse. Under the glow of my porch light, the two kids stood again, right by my fence side by side, staring through the kitchen window. I pushed open the back door. Hey, I called, forcing calm into my voice. It's late. You should go home. They didn't move. The boy's smile didn't falter. The girl's mouth twitched like she wanted to speak, but instead, they turned and slipped away into the dark gap between our houses. I stood there gripping the dish towel, heart hammering for reasons I couldn't name. The next morning, I mentioned it to the mailman. His name was Frank, an older guy who always wore a Ridgeview Little League cap. Those the Miller kids? He asked, glancing toward their house. Yeah, they're odd ones. Don't go to school anymore, far as I know. They don't? I frowned. Why not? He shrugged. Their mom keeps to herself. Folks don't see much of her. I thanked him, but his words stuck. By the end of the week, strange things started piling up. My garbage cans were always moved from the curb, never knocked over, just neatly pushed back against the fence. My porch light flickered every few nights between 2 and 3 a.m., even after I changed the bulb. One morning, I found a small, muddy handprint on my back door. I told myself it was just local kids being curious. I almost believed it. Almost. One evening, I was on a Zoom call with my coworker Tina, going over ad copy, when I heard a faint tapping in the living room. Not loud, just soft, rhythmic. I muted my mic. Hello? I called. Nothing. I got up and walked to the window. The tapping stopped. Through the glass, I saw movement in the yard. 2 small shapes darting behind the bushes. I stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp with cold. All right, you two, I said, forcing a laugh. Not funny. A voice floated from the side of the house. We weren't trying to be funny. The boy's voice. Then what are you doing here? I asked, trying to steady my voice. The girl peeked out from behind the bush. You left your light on, she said. I blinked. What light? In your bathroom, the boy replied. We can see it from our window. A chill crept up my spine. My bathroom window was frosted glass, barely visible from the street. How could they even notice that? Okay, I said finally. Thanks for letting me know. But you should go home now. They didn't move. They just stood there watching. His face was blank now. The boy said he doesn't like it when the lights stay on too long. Who? I asked before I could stop myself. The man who lives between the houses, the girl whispered. Then they both turned and ran, vanishing into the dark. That night I barely slept. Every creak, every shifting shadow made me flinch. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a faint dragging sound outside my bedroom window. Something scraping against the siding, slow and deliberate. I pulled the curtain back an inch. Nothing. Just the yard, silver and empty under the moonlight. But the next morning when I went out, 3 deep scratches scarred the wall below that window. They looked carved, like someone had used a key or a nail. 3 long, frantic lines etched into the paint. A week later, I finally met their mother. I was getting the mail when she stepped out of her house barefoot, wearing an oversized gray hoodie and pajama pants, though it was nearly noon. Her hair hung in greasy strands and her eyes were sunken, ringed with exhaustion that made my stomach twist. Hi, I said carefully. I'm Rachel. I live next door. She blinked, slow, like my words had to travel a long way to reach her. Oh, you're the new one. Yeah, I, met your kids the other day. They seem sweet. Her lips tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. They're fine, she said flatly. They keep to themselves. Before I could respond, she turned and slipped back inside. No small talk. No neighborly warmth. Just gone. That same evening, I saw something I still can't explain. I was making tea around 9 when I glanced out my kitchen window. Their house was dark, except for a faint glow in an upstairs room. The girl stood there pressed against the glass, her face pale in the light. She was holding something, a stuffed rabbit maybe, but her expression was wrong. She wasn't looking out, she was looking down, directly at me. I stepped back, my mug clinking against the counter. Then something moved behind her, a tall shape, much too tall to be a child. The light blinked out. The next morning I went straight to the police station. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I told the officer, Deputy Harris, that I was worried about the kids. I mentioned the scratches, the late-night visits, the strange things they'd said. He jotted notes, his pen scratching lazily. "Ma'am," he said finally, "we've done welfare checks at that address before. Kids are homeschooled. Mother's protective. We've never found anything concerning." "So that's it?" I asked, my voice rising. "You're not even going to check again?" He sighed. "Unless there's evidence of abuse or danger, my hands are tied. But if you see something specific, anything physical, you call us right away. Understood?" I nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe a word of it. That night, I left every light on in the house. Around 2:15 a.m., the doorbell rang. The sound hit me like a jolt. I nearly spilled my tea. Who the hell rings a doorbell at that hour? It rang again. I crept to the peephole. The girl stood there alone, face pale and streaked with tears. I unlocked the door and opened it just an inch. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" She looked up at me. "He's mad," she whispered. My skin prickled. "Who?" "The man between the houses." I swallowed hard. "Do you want to come in? I can call your mom." Before she could answer, a sharp, shrill whistle cut through the night from somewhere outside. The girl's face drained of color. "I have to go," she said, stepping back. He said, "No talking." "Wait." I started, but she was already running, disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, I went to check on them. Their front door was slightly open. I knocked. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the still air. "It's Rachel." No response. The house smelled stale, mold, dust, and something faintly metallic. Boxes and old toys cluttered the floor. Drawings were taped to the walls. Crude sketches of tall, thin figures standing between two houses, faces scribbled out in thick black crayon. "Hello?" I called again, my throat dry. Then came the sound of slow footsteps upstairs, one then another, steady and deliberate. I froze at the bottom of the staircase. "Hello?" I said again, my voice trembling. A door creaked open at the top. The boy stood there holding a small flashlight, its beam flickering. "She's not here," he said softly. "Where's your mom?" He tilted his head. "She went outside last night." My stomach turned to ice. "Did she come back?" He shook his head, then whispered, "You should go home now. He doesn't like visitors." That was the last time I saw them. 2 days later, the Miller house was empty. Curtains open, lights off, silent. No one saw them leave. Even Frank, the mailman, hadn't noticed a thing. Their car was gone too. A week after that, a for rent sign appeared in the yard. It's been 3 years since then. I still live in Ridgeview, though I've thought about leaving more times than I can count. Sometimes I catch myself staring at that house. It's still empty. The tricycle's still there, rusted, half buried in weeds. And sometimes, when the wind's just right, I hear laughter. Not the kind that makes you smile, the kind that crawls under your skin. And just before dawn, when the light is gray and thin, I sometimes see them, two small figures standing between the houses, watching, waiting. And if I look too long, I swear I see something taller standing behind them. I was 8 when everything started. We lived in Easton Grove, a tiny stretch of southern Illinois that barely showed up on maps unless you were specifically looking to get lost. Dirt roads stretched like veins into the surrounding fields. One lonely grocery store sat near the town center. A couple of gas stations dotted the main road, and everyone else kept their noses in their own business, maybe a little too much. Mom worked nights at a diner off Route 13. She had this tough, practical streak, but beneath it she was gentle, always smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla lotion, like she carried warmth in her skin. Dad was the opposite. Mean, unpredictable. He could walk through the door grinning one night and the next bring home a broken bottle with a temper to match. Our house sat at the very edge of a cul-de-sac, staring out at a cornfield that stretched endlessly. Next door lived the Maddens, 2 kids, Billy Ray my age and Lacey 6. Jolene, their mom, was quiet, always baking something sweet that left the entire block smelling of cinnamon and sugar. Earl, their dad, was a man people whispered about but never confronted. Construction worker, bald, huge hands, permanent scowl. When he yelled, the sound could cut through our closed windows, seeping into our kitchen like a dark fog. That's the way of small towns. You hear everything, but you say nothing. It was late summer, 2003. I remember because it was the first time I felt, deep in my gut, that something was off before anything actually happened. That afternoon, Billy Ray and I had been racing bikes along a narrow dirt path behind the cornfield, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the rows of corn. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead and glancing over his shoulder every few minutes. "You okay, man?" I asked. He shrugged, forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." But I knew he wasn't tired. There was something twitchy, restless behind his eyes, like he was bracing for some storm he could already sense coming. Later that evening, Mom left for her shift. She kissed my forehead, kissed Dad's cheek as he slumped on the couch with a half-empty bottle of Jack beside him, and told me to stay inside, lock the doors. I flicked on the TV, cartoons flickering across the room when I heard it, shouting outside. I peeked through the blinds. The Madden's porch light cast sharp shadows, and I saw Earl pacing, yelling. Jolene's hands raised in a vain attempt to calm him. Then with a sickening crack, he slapped her. She stumbled backward into the railing. I froze. Even at 8, I knew that wasn't normal. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to run for Dad, but that part of him that should have been a protector didn't exist. Billy Ray appeared in our doorway then, barefoot, clutching Lacey's small hand. Their eyes were wide, wet with fear. I opened our front door before thinking. "Come in." "Quick," I urged. They ran across the porch, Lacey's soft sobs breaking the quiet. I locked the door behind them and guided them to the kitchen. "You guys okay?" I asked. Billy Ray nodded, his voice cracking. He's going to kill her!" My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. I just knew we had to do something. "Call Mom," I urged them. "She'll know what to do." I grabbed the landline and dialed the number stuck on the fridge. 2 rings. Then her voice, low and tired, came through, the clatter of dishes faint in the background. "Hello, Mom," I whispered. "It's me. Billy Ray and Lacey are here. Their dad..." A sudden deafening bang outside cut me off, followed by a silence that roared in my ears. I dropped the phone. For what felt like forever, none of us moved. Lacey's soft sobs were the only sound. Then came the heavy footsteps on our porch. Slow, deliberate. "Billy," a deep, chilling voice called. "Lacey, come on out now." It was Earl. Billy Ray grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in tight. "Don't answer," he hissed. The door handle rattled once, twice, then a sharp, violent knock that made me flinch. "Open the damn door, boy," a voice growled. My dad stirred on the couch, mumbling something incoherent. "What the hell's going on?" he slurred, rubbing his eyes. He stumbled toward the hallway, and before I could stop him, his hand was on the doorknob. "What do you want?" Dad's voice shook slightly, thick with liquor. Earl stood there, face red, eyes wild, his right hand bleeding, the left hidden behind his leg. "Your kid's got something that's mine," he said, quiet but heavy. Dad squinted. "The hell are you talking about?" Earl didn't answer. He just stepped forward, and that's when I saw it, a hammer gleaming dimly in his hand. Everything after that blurred, like I was trapped inside a nightmare. Dad swung first, a clumsy punch that caught Earl square in the jaw. The hammer clattered to the porch and they collided, grappling like wild animals. "Run!" Billy Ray screamed. I grabbed Lacey's small hand and bolted down the hallway toward the back door. The cool air hit us like a slap, dirt and grass clinging to our bare feet. I turned just in time to see Earl shove Dad against the house and raise the hammer again. The sound it made, I can still hear it in my bones. We ran toward the cornfield, barefoot, crying, lungs burning. The night smelled of damp earth and gasoline, the darkness heavy and suffocating. Yelling followed us, echoing between the rows of corn. Then another thud. Then silence. We didn't stop until we reached the old irrigation shed at the far edge of the field. I pulled Lacey inside, shutting the door and pressing my back against the wood, trying to quiet the frantic pounding of my heart. Billy Ray was trembling violently. We have to go back for Mom," he whispered. "She's gone, Billy," I said, the words tasting wrong, bitter. I didn't know why I said it. I just knew. We stayed in that shed until sunrise, clinging to each other in the shadows. When the sirens finally cut through the night, we stepped out slowly, hands raised like criminals, eyes wide and hollow. The cops found Earl's truck still idling in the driveway. Jolene was gone. Dad lay on the kitchen floor, alive but barely, eyes glassy, skin pale. Earl was found an hour later, sitting at the edge of the cornfield, the hammer still in his lap. He didn't even flinch when they approached. They called it a crime of passion. That phrase has always haunted me. There's no passion in smashing someone's skull in front of their children, only hate. Billy Ray and Lacey went to live with their aunt in Wisconsin. I never saw them again. Sometimes when I drift half asleep, I still hear Lacey's quiet, broken whisper, asking if her mom would ever wake up. Dad survived, but he never came back the same. He stopped drinking. He barely spoke. For years, I thought he blamed me for opening that door. Sometimes I think he did. He died in his sleep when I was 21. I didn't cry. When I turned 30, I finally started therapy. Nightmares had haunted me for years, the same one over and over. Back in that house, the porch light flickering, the hammer echoing through the walls. I ran, but the cornfield never ended. My therapist said trauma doesn't just live in your head. It lives in your body and your bones. That's why, even now, every 4th of July, fireworks make me flinch, the way I did as that 8-year-old kid hiding in the shed. A few months ago, I drove back to Eason Grove. The houses looked smaller. The fields had been cleared for a strip mall, but the old irrigation shed still stood, rusted, half collapsed. I parked and just stood there. The air was thick and humid. Somewhere a dog barked, and for the first time in decades I let myself cry. Not for me. Not for Dad, but for Billy Ray and Lacey, the kids who never had a normal childhood. Because deep down I've always known, that night wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. It stole something from all of us. And some sounds like a hammer striking wood never fade.